There was an expert that said in a committee last week, I don't know about cutting the signal, but he said, well, do we have to shut the tap and cut off these large organizations as long as they're not responding to requests? Is this possible? Well, that's an interesting example. The government is looking at all the different possibilities. As I said on many different occasions, we're taking a whole-of-government approach with regards to digital platforms in general.
You heard the question. There were witnesses who suggested cutting the signal, cutting them off. Would you consider that? We are considering all the different possibilities. Could you imagine that? The arrogance, the chutzpah. Yes, you can imagine that because she's a Trudeau cabinet minister. But can you imagine the docility and the passivity, and more than that, the just sheer lack of curiosity from the media party that greeted that? That was not some secret recording. That was in the foyer of the House of Commons. Yet the only other journalist I know who has dug into this matter is our friend Andrew Lawton of TNC.news, who joins us now via Skype. Andrew, it's great to see you again. Whenever we talk, it's about bad news, though.
Yes, it is. And, you know, there's a really shameful part of this, Ezra. There's, I think, a two-pronged tragedy here. Number one is that a minister of the Crown would dare to say that. And there's another clip from the same press conference where she says it's something to think about. And the other tragedy here is that, as you mentioned, that's almost a week old. And there has been effectively no English language mainstream media coverage of this. There was one story in Le Journal de Montréal, which is where I learned about it. There's been a column in the National Post. But as far as actual reporting, I have not seen anything from the mainstream press on what is, in effect, the Democratic Institutions Minister, with the emphasis on the institutions and not the Democratic, saying quite literally that her government would consider shutting down private companies that aren't even Canadian companies if they don't comply with what the federal government's doing. And that a minister would say that is reprehensible, and that the media would not hold her feet to the fire for it is all the more shameful.
Andrew, I'm so glad that you corrected me to point out the Journal de Montréal, which is a very large newspaper in Quebec owned by Pierre-Carl Pelleteau, actually, the former boss of the Sun News Network. I'm so glad that you corrected me because, of course, they did break the news. That's also how I learned about it. So it's not completely dead, but the fact that you and I, and French is not either of our mother's tongues, the fact that we had to learn about it from a French tabloid in Montreal is embarrassing to the media party. What do you think of my question that I posed earlier, Andrew, that if, I don't know, if Stephen Harper were Prime Minister and a Jason Kenney, a Pierre Poilievre, a John Baird, or some cabinet minister of the day would have said, yeah, I'm thinking of pulling the plug on Twitter. Yeah, I'm thinking of going full North Korean and shutting them down if they don't do my bit. They're already following the criminal code. They're already liable for, you know, other crimes on the books. The fact that Karina Gould is demanding they censor politics, and she's threatening to pull the plug, I swear that is Iran stuff, North Korea stuff. And like you say, just the slightest murmur in English Canada, nothing more.
No, and I think that there's an important point here. And, you know, one observation I've made in the past is that what the media accuses Donald Trump of doing, Justin Trudeau's government has actually been doing. When you look at the SNC-Lavalin affair, firing the Attorney General, I mean, these things that really the media is in hysterics and has been for years about Trump doing, the Trudeau government does with relative impunity. And here we have, and I don't use this word lightly, and I want to make very clear that I say this word because of the gravity of the word. But this is a fascist proposition for the government to threaten to shut down private enterprise for non-compliance with a government restriction on speech. And again, I know the media calls everyone fascists and, you know, Nazis and the new Hitlers and all of that. And I'm not using this with the same level of looseness that they do. I am talking about what is at its core a fascist principle for government to want to shut down social media companies. And by the way, Ezra, this is not, for my part anyway, a defense of social media companies. I find that they themselves are quite reprehensible in the way they engage with free speech. but I have to stand up for that freedom here. So it's not that I'm sympathizing broadly with social media companies. It's that the Canadians who use those platforms to communicate are the ones that are actually being punished here, not the companies themselves. If government shuts down Twitter, it's not just taking away Twitter's speech, it's taking away the speech of anyone who uses Twitter.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.